Chapter 10. Miscellaneous Diatribes. The first national advertising of Blue Boar pipe tobacco was written about 1923. Yet the brand was already long established and quite widely known. To explain Blue Boar's popularity, one of the headlines submitted was, "One man tells another." Although the copywriter wrote this with no idea of creating anything more than a headline, its slogan value was recognized by the copy chief. It was used once as a headline and then adopted as the Blue Boar slogan and the theme song of the whole campaign. Aesop Glim contends that this is typical of the manner in which most good slogans have their beginnings. They write themselves. They are naturals. When someone says, "We must have a slogan," the results are apt to be forced and far-fetched. The slogan thus created may seem logical or even musical, but it is probably not indigenous. With no roots in the product, it is a parasite and not a basic development. Conversely, when the sales and advertising departments are steadily working at the telling of a story, certain key ideas and probably key words keep coming up. Time and again, these basic ideas and words prove their effectiveness. The chances are that many slogans are actually in use long before their slogan value is recognized. Cue for copywriters. When you are bidden to create a slogan, resist as hard as you dare. But if it's inevitable, don't try to create out of thin air. Go back over all the old advertisements. Ask the sales manager or the star salesman for copies of a dozen of his most successful sales letters. Study them all and see if the true slogan hasn't already written itself. House organs, organic and inorganic. A house organ or company paper may be published solely for internal consumption, to be read only by members of your own organization. Its audience may consist of dealers only. It may be addressed primarily to customers and prospects. It can be a powerful medium for delivering certain messages which cannot otherwise be delivered, either in the same tone of voice or in the same detail. It can be different from all other mediums used, for morale, entertainment, education, institutional value, or for all-out selling. As in many another situation, if it's good, it's very, very good, and if it isn't, it most certainly isn't. Quality of paper and printing are no substitutes for what isn't said. If you have something interesting to say, even mimeographing will deliver it. If you haven't, 4 color plates on parchment won't help you any. Be sure the material isn't too local, too topical. Engagements, marriages, and births, for instance, are only interesting when you know something about the people involved. There's nothing more yokel than a joke that's too local. You may need separate house publications for staff, dealer, and customer audiences. But let the dealer see the customer paper, and let the staff see the dealer and customer papers. You are on the way to a vital organic house organ only when you don't know what to leave out of each issue. If you are having trouble getting it out, expand your material gathering resources. Publish less frequently until you find the point at which there is no straining for material. As in our discussion of slogans, you aren't apt to be successful if you suddenly say, "We must have a house organ." You aren't ready for one. You are ready when time after time you've said, "I wish every member of such and such an audience could share this news with us." Slogans and house organs write themselves, virtually as byproducts of other activities. In the realm of industrial advertising, probably no item is subject to more penny-wise, pound-foolish thinking than the catalog. All too often it is planned, written, purchased, and/or used on some very wrong basis. Catalogs cost money. Someone is sure to say, "too much money." So the temptation is to save by cutting corners. Use more of the old cuts, reduce the number of pages, cut out the bleed pages, use a cheaper paper, etc. Result: a catalog that is never quite as good as it might have been. Catalogs cost money. So the temptation is to print too few copies. Result: we can't afford, 1, to send a catalog to every customer, 2, to send a catalog to every new prospect, 3, to let the salesman pass these out on their own judgment. Why not cut out the catalog entirely? Save the whole sum. Vanity is one reason. Management likes to see, and show to personal friends, a visualization of the whole line in one convenient package. Something to believe in is another reason. Management and staff need to see some crystallization of all their efforts. They need the reassurance of being able to look at something tangible and to say, This is what we do. This is not an exceptional case. A firm with 12,000 fairly steady customers prints 10,000 copies of their new catalog. The price turns out to be 75 cents a copy. Management considers this pretty costly. Sales and advertising are warned not to waste them. The catalog lists items priced from $6 to $60 to several $100s each. If the print order had been for 20,000 copies, they could have made a practical distribution to all old customers and to selected prospects. And the price would have been 40 cents per copy. But they bought only 10,000 copies. And how long is this supply to last? 2 years. The quantity that is inadequate for 1 year's work is to be parceled out over 2 years. And how will the catalog be budgeted? Having been produced this year, it will be paid for in full, out of this year's advertising budget. The budget not having been proportionately increased, something else will have to give. All the catalogs for this year and next are to be written off this year. Most other equipment is amortized in proportion to its use expectancy. Let's get down to earth on the subject of catalogs. How can we plan, write, buy, and use them on a sensible basis? First, allow plenty of time for the planning and writing. A whole year may not be too long. Take full stock of all the uses to which the book may be put. Think of all the different types of people it may influence, under all conceivable circumstances. Second, make a list of all the people from whom the necessary information is to be gathered. Budget and schedule their time for divulging this information while still carrying on their regular work. Are any of these gold mines of information on the road much of the time or located in branch offices? Third, set up a generous time schedule for photographing, retouching, writing technical data, and for getting each item carefully checked, corrected, and finally approved by all the logical authorities and critics. Fourth, have the catalog written to be a sales tool. Give it the wherewithal to sell as well as show the wares. A catalog does not need to be a morgue. Give your sales power and you'll suddenly have the confidence to send it to more people, even unescorted. Fifth, buy enough copies to do a complete job. The price per copy will be coming down simultaneously. How long will it be before you'll put out a new catalog? In this period, how many of your present customers will need how many copies? Be sure you get at least one copy into the hands of every present customer. Those who have bought before are your best prospects. In this period, how many new live prospects will show up? Prospects worthy to receive a copy of your catalog. Some analysis of your past advertising and sales records should give you the basis for an estimate on this score. Have some faith in the judgment of your salesmen, the men on the firing line, as to how many catalogs they will want to hand out. Consider whether every person who writes in response to your publication advertising isn't worthy to receive a catalog. How many schools, colleges, and libraries should have copies? Sixth, establish a follow-up system. Don't merely send out a catalog and forget it. Keep a live record of all firms having your catalog. Write them periodic letters calculated to make them use your catalog. Finally, give some thought whether the catalog should be charged to the advertising or the sales department, and whether it should be written off in 1 year or over its use expectancy. Both are moot points, but it is obvious that the advertising budget should not be unduly penalized. Aesop Glim leans toward the idea that a catalog is a legitimate sales department expense and should be so charged. At the same time, since writing and printing are involved, it should be produced by the advertising department. In most cases, the advertising agency can make important contributions to your catalog construction, all the way from the initial layout to the writing of selling copy to the final skilled proofreading. Have you started dressing up your annual report to the stockholders? Why not get some of the same outside perspective on your catalog report to the customers? It need not be a morgue. It should not be 100% factory-minded. Most girls spend the first 18 years of their lives learning to be good girls. By that time, mental habits are pretty well fixed. Many of them have a hard time learning to be normal women. Cue for copywriters. Keep your copy appeals to women on the conservative side. You can interest all of them some of the time with the Cleopatra story. You can catch the attention of most of them, most of the time, on the Lily Maid of Astolat side. Aesop Glim once said, in his usual didactic manner, Copy which is to appeal to the eye should never be read aloud. It makes no more sense to say, "How does this newspaper advertisement sound?" than to say, "How does this newspaper advertisement look if I stand on my head?" This was amicably challenged by Roland B. Smith, Associate Professor of Advertising, School of Business, University of Connecticut. He said, "I have always thought that readers sounded the words they read in their mind's ear, so to speak. Thus, to read twin train crash is not easily done without experiencing the tendency to read it." Twin twain crash. Most of all, Aesop Glim was letting off steam against the habit some copywriters have of reading their copy aloud to one another, for criticism or admiration. Plus the habit some bosses and clients have of sarcastically reading the copy aloud, to the man who wrote it, usually when they have no idea or basis on which to criticize it, either specifically or constructively. In either case, the procedure seems futile, not a basis on which to judge copy intended for the prospect's eye. Neither copywriter nor boss will be there to read it to the prospect. Aesop Glim subscribes to the theory that all thinking, including reading to oneself, is silently and usually unconsciously verbalized. But he's not qualified to go any further into either the physiology or the behavior of the mind. He can't discover that his own mind has an ear. For cooperation, not for defense. The following letter, slightly enlarged by photostat, hangs in the reception room of the Gray Manufacturing Company in Hartford, Connecticut. To visiting friends. A cordial welcome is extended to visitors within our doors. We ourselves do not enjoy waiting in other offices when we are away from home, and therefore want to save your time as much as possible. Please keep in mind, however, that there may be other visitors ahead of you. Do not hesitate to ask how long it will be before you can see the Gray Company associate you wish to see, or to ask a second time if necessary. Our information desk is for cooperation, not for defense. Information is gladly given. If you are a stranger in this area, please do not hesitate to ask for information. Roadmaps, timetables, and other information will be gladly furnished to you, if we have them, or if we can get them for you. If you have left others in your car, bring them inside where it probably will be more comfortable. W.E. Dittmar's President. When we sell our services, we are servants. When we buy the services of others, we are customers. In the retail store, the principle that the customer is always right has proved practical for a good many years. And the average salesman of goods or services has usually found it expedient to treat his customers with pretty much the same attitude. Public utilities are public servants. The fact that they become large does not alter their status. They are ill-advised when they permit their advertising messages to sound like the butler telling the lady of the house when and how she may use his services. It seems to Aesop Glim that a good many utterances by public utility concerns are open to interpretations of holier than thou, of condescension, and of you're just plain lucky to get our service at all. By way of contrast, most of the big oil companies, serving the American motorist and the American home, remain as courteous as an independent corner grocer. Running advertisements is an implication of honesty. You have sufficient faith in your proposition to put it into writing. The notable exception is the person, like Hitler, who believes in the power of a good, whopping lie steadily repeated. Whatever your philosophy, your advertisements keep your name in the marketplace. They brand you, and you have written your own label. If your advertisements are distinguished by bad taste, faulty grammar, touches of pornography, and half-truths, you may be sure that you are not fooling all of the people all of the time. Some of the public probably wonders whether you are fooling yourself. We will assume that no matter what the advertising message, honest or only half honest, the consumer still gets his money's worth. But what about the competitors? Occasionally an advertiser is stopped from telling the truth if the truth puts his competitors at too great a disadvantage. The ethics in such a case are well over Aesop Glim's head. Occasionally an advertiser is stopped from telling lies if the lies give him too great an advantage over his competitors. Here the right and wrong seem more clearly defined. A cease and desist order is not adequate punishment. The competitors should have damages. Father Barber of One Man's Family on NBC once said, "Nothing, not anything, is simple." This pleased Aesop Glim particularly because he has long belabored his juniors in advertising with something that is at least partly along the same line. There is no unimportant detail. No piece of copy is stronger than its weakest fact. Every detail of an illustration is either helping to tell your story or slowing you up. The smallest error in either grammar or typography is the most glaring part of any advertisement. On the same program, Father Barber waved at another of Aesop Glim's sacred cows. He said, "Many a great man has had a one-track mind." Wholehearted specialization will always make you outstanding. The value of specialization depends upon your goal in life and the object of your specialization. But as the world is so full of a number of things, why have a one-track mind? Advertising has developed at least one grammatical form that is very much its own. The makers of duplex widgets announced that they are now ready to serve a wider audience. They invite your patronage. Perhaps this frequent use of the third-person plural can be likened to the we of royalty, or the editorial we. But its use and purpose seem to be quite different in intent. The more direct construction would be, we who make duplex widgets announce that we, etc. Is the use of they more modest, more dignified, more impressive, stronger, colder, more affected? Whether presented in the first person or the third person construction, the same basic message gets delivered. But how the tone of voice changes. Here is one of many situations in which the copywriter must not decide blindly. Your prospect's response to your invitation will most often depend upon your tone of voice at least as much as upon the basic merit of your proposition. Don't get into a rut. Try both forms. See which will ring true to this particular audience at this particular time. Then remember that there's also the second-person construction. Instead of either they or we, the whole proposition might be presented in terms of what you, the prospect, will get out of duplex widgets. If the advertiser has thought it out, there is some particular relationship he wishes to establish and maintain with his customers and prospects. Some exact degree of formality or informality or intimacy or keep your distance. Be sure that you, as the copywriter, don't unthinkingly alter the relationship for him. Once upon a time, there was a woman copywriter in a fashion house. One day, in her very best dress and with her nose freshly powdered, she stormed into her boss's office and delivered a harangue along these lines. "This place is a boiler factory. I'm going crazy. My copy's getting stale. I need inspiration. I've got to get out of here for a while. Get a fresh viewpoint. I think I ought to have a trip to Paris." And to her great surprise, the boss looked at her for a moment and then said, "I think you're absolutely right." Whereupon he picked up the telephone, got the treasurer, and said, "Al, Miss Pringle has just sold me the idea that she could write better copy if she gets out of the office now and then. Gets out and sharpens up her viewpoint. She wants a trip to Paris. Will you get the tickets for her, please?" "What's that?" "No, not Paris, France. Paris, Kentucky. Miss Pringle's going to get acquainted with some of our customers. Copywriters in retail stores and in large mail-order houses have occasionally sounded off on this score. It's all very fine for advertising agency people to talk about the fact-finding and copy research they use in preparation for their copywriting. Most of the time we have to make bricks without straw. We're always up against it for time. Time and again we are handed a layout and told to supply 84 words on a product we know nothing about. Or the buyer comes dashing in and wants an advertisement of such and such a size on such and such an item. And once again, no data. If you think a lot of our copy is just words, maybe that's the reason. Since this type of complaining has come to Aesop Glim from copywriters employed in some of our better-known department stores and mail-order houses, and not once but several times, he feels obliged to raise his eyebrows. How can these firms be so successful in their overall operations if they're so nonchalant about their copy? The copy can't always be simply a matter of known values and new low prices. It seems to Aesop Glim that the responsibility rests with the buyer. He's bought the goods to sell. He's bought them on his analysis of certain values and specifications. His request for copy should be accompanied by some sort of data sheet, giving all possible facts about the merchandise, the facts that led him to buy the merchandise in the first place. That would supply the fact-finding the copywriter needs, Or conversely, the advertising department could make up a checklist of needed information and refuse to write copy for the buyer who doesn't cooperate. This presupposes an advertiser-advertising agency relationship. Clients should be treated as if they are both important and intelligent. We can hardly minimize their importance. No client, no income. But sometimes we overstress it. We are too quick to agree with them. We accept their opinions and dicta without sufficient weighing. By and large, an advertiser is buying an agency's experience and analytical ability, even more than its copy, art, and production services. We do a disservice when we fail to offer a considered opinion every time, whether it is to be accepted or not. The further evidence of overemphasizing the client's importance shows up in the copy department. Too many copywriters write to the client's whims and foibles instead of to his customers and prospects. Too many copywriters get beaten over the head with the client's whims and foibles by account executives who are afraid of their clients and overstress their importance. As for the client's intelligence, sometimes we don't give them enough credit for intelligence. Perhaps this is a matter of revenge. Having overstressed their importance, we console ourselves by minimizing their intelligence in private. We excuse ourselves for writing inferior copy by saying that good copy would be over the client's head. The solution for both sins seems to lie in don't ever be afraid of a client. If you accept his dicta as fiats, you automatically excuse yourself from thinking. Whereas if you weigh and even challenge his opinions, you may get some pleasant surprises. When he justifies his opinions, he may give you his real reasons, and they may be good reasons. The intelligence that enabled him to attain his position may suddenly reveal itself in what he now tells you. Or he may display that other great kind of intelligence, open-mindedness, the ability to accept a new idea. Finally, you owe it to yourself to challenge a client's statement if you don't agree with it. How do you know he's not testing you with a deliberate misstatement? If the person to whom you sell your goods or services has, in turn, other firms to which to sell his goods or services, then you have the basis for a happy relationship. That basis lies in keeping your eye on your client's clients. Your client's income rests on keeping his clients happy. How can you help him do so? How can you help him increase the number of his happy clients? The minute you adopt this attitude, you and your client are sitting on the same side of the desk. There is no longer any buying or selling between you. You are joined in a conspiracy. His problems are your problems, at least equally important. You have now lost your original problem of how to keep your client happy. Let's narrow this situation down to the relationship between the copywriter and the person who has the final okay on his copy. Your boss or client has his mind on how to keep his clients happy. His clients may be of many types, from his own salesmen and his distributors, agents, wholesalers, or retailers, to those who ultimately consume, convert, or use his goods or services. The copy you write must tell your client's story in terms calculated to make his various clients happy, according to their respective needs or desires. Your own yardstick now ceases to be, how will my client like this piece of copy, this layout, this illustration? You are now concerned exclusively with questions A and B. Question A is, will this copy make all who have a hand in the selling more aggressive and more confident in their selling of these goods or services? Question B is, will this copy make all who need or want this type of goods or services more anxious to buy this particular brand of goods or services? There's only one difficulty in getting into such a relationship. Before you can start to write your copy, you must find out what kind of salesmen, distributors, and consumers your client has. This will probably necessitate leaving your ivory tower to mingle with your audience. Some copywriters don't have time for that. P.S. If you are the kind of copywriter who does believe in getting out and mingling with your audiences, if you are ready to say amen to Aesop Glim's preachment above, don't get too smug. Search your conscience and see if you don't agree that few of us ever do half enough mingling. When you write about electrical appliances, tell right out loud whether your appliance is AC or DC or both. If it's both, and you don't say so, a lot of people are not going to take the trouble to find out. If it's AC only, you know you can satisfy the bulk of your market. But the minority can get angry over your failure to tell the whole truth and boycott you when they move into an AC neighborhood. You have nothing to lose immediately. and something to be saved against a future when you may still need their business. Closely akin is the failure to tell, specifically or approximately, the price of the merchandise you are writing about. Many a manufacturer is reluctant to name a specific price, but the magazine editors seem to have no difficulty in letting their readers know that the price is under $20, approximately $35, etc. The fact is that your advertisement can sell a great many people on the merits of your proposition, then lose them because they assume your price is out of their reach and they don't take the trouble to find out. Give your reader some idea of the size of the merchandise you are talking about, and, if important, the weight. There is surely no building of goodwill if the customer makes a special trip to the store, only to discover that your merchandise is too small, too big, too light, or too heavy. A human figure in scale with your goods is one way to give a quick idea of size. Aesop Glim recalls 1918 to 1928, when there were four particularly outstanding schools of advertising. Alphabetically, they were N.W. Ayer, George Batten, now BBD&O, Lord and Thomas, now Foote, Cohn and Belding, and J. Walter Thompson. Each of these advertising agencies was billing between 10 and 20 million a year. As late as 1928, there were probably only 10 agencies billing over 10 million. The fact that this item deals with four agencies does not mean that those four held a monopoly on all the virtues. Collectively, they were probably placing 1/20th of all national advertising, which means that 19/20ths was being placed by other agencies, and that much of their work was at least equally noteworthy and equally successful. However, the Big Four took themselves pretty seriously and succeeded in making other people take them seriously. They did have plenty on the ball, and their public relations were working in the right direction. For many years, the young man entering banking had thought himself particularly lucky if he got his schooling at the bankers or the guarantee. In advertising, the Big Four achieved this same standing as the prestige schools, in which to start, in which to remain, or from which to springboard into some later connection. The Ivy League suddenly recognized advertising as a wholly legitimate occupation. The graduating classes of 1919 were probably the first to send more men into advertising than into banking. Steve Benet and Johnny Marquand of that vintage tried their hands at it while perfecting their more individual talents. The prestige of the Big Four undoubtedly had much to do with winning general social acceptance for going into advertising. Today, like West Point, advertising automatically creates officers and gentlemen. However, there were some college men in advertising before 1918. The Big Four took themselves seriously, as noted. What is meant is each took itself seriously, very seriously. By and large, each looked down upon the other three and upon all other agencies. If you were in any of the Big Four, you were really in the Big One. You had the only right way of doing things. Your agency was the only one taking research seriously. Yours was the only one whose copy sparkled. Yours were the only truly distinctive layouts. Yours the only civilized typography. In terms of layout and typography, there was truth to the several claims of being distinctive. For a period of years, it was usually possible to pick up any magazine or newspaper and, if you knew the earmarks, spot quickly which advertising had been prepared by which member of the Big Four. When you guessed wrong, it was because of imitation by some other agency. But that other agency was never a member of the Big Four. They wouldn't think of copying each other. Their own way was the only right way, and all other ways were wrong. The mystery was how the others could be so wrong and stay so big. Many a man still alive can remember that such were the opinions of the rank and file at Ayer Batten, L&T, or JWT. Aesop Glim does not pretend to reflect the thinking of their inner management circles. A sidelight is the fact that each was pretty quick to hire away a good man or woman. The rivalry and competition were good for the advertising business. They led to the development of new techniques, to a reduction in guesswork and bluff, to an ever-increasing respect for fact-finding as the first step in advertising plans. The present size and health of each of these older advertising agencies is ample proof that, with all its distinctions, none was ever far from the fundamentals. Sometimes one of the older universities is called the mother of colleges. In that spirit, each member of the old Big Four can boast of its mothering of newer advertising agencies. Fortunately for advertising, there are no pure strains. There's always intermarriage. It seems to Aesop Glim that business executives are the forgotten men in a good many advertising plans. Perhaps this charge can be aimed most often at one particular group, the firms making materials and equipment that are used by other firms in the production of their finished goods. Such materials and equipment may range all the way from inks, adhesives, or packaging materials to lathes and machine tools. Such materials and equipment are most often specified, bought, and used by the men in the plants, ranking from the works manager or plant superintendent on down. These are the men the salesman sees in courts, partly for the best reasons possible, partly because he can't get to see the higher-ups. His sales report shows who was seen, and everyone happily assumes that everyone who should have been seen was seen. Top management's opinion apparently was not needed, so top management gets left out of the advertising plan. The truth is, top management should be and can be interested in virtually every detail of production and distribution. Management executives do not spend all their time at the board table, nor in profound study of major policy matters. Their attention is no harder and no easier to catch than that of the prospects for a new shaving cream. In the last analysis, every business executive has the same basic policy problems: how to turn out a better product and sell it more profitably to more customers. If your material or product can truly help him, show him why and you'll have his attention. A major business executive can be made to take an interest even in the adhesives that stick the label to his package. Point out to him that his product, minus his label, has almost no commercial value. He wants the consumer to be able to identify his product and repeat his purchase. A messy, mutilated, or missing label is a liability and not a help. Similarly, the business executive can be interested in your equipment if you show him what it has to do with making a better product and/or selling it more profitably to more people. It pays to remember that not all top executives came up by the same route. The executive with a production background can readily see the manufacturing performance side of the story. The executive who came up through sales can understand the significance of sure deliveries and satisfied customers. Even the poor fellow with nothing but a financial background can grasp the possibilities of lowered cost and increased output. The second important group at which such charges can frequently be aimed is that of the publishers of business and industrial papers. Like the salesman who is content to work solely with the works manager, factory superintendent, etc., the publishers rest their case with sales and advertising managers only. They fail to sell the value of their fields to top management. Thereby, they fail to get the money appropriated. The advertising manager can hardly buy advertising in publications for which no money has been appropriated. In order to start a discussion, let us say that there are 3 degrees of intensity in copy: superlative, comparative, and positive. Superlative: our widgets are the best. Comparative: ordinary widgets have many shortcomings. Our widgets don't have these shortcomings. Positive: no reference to competition. As far as Aesop Glim can observe, the old oars are the best school is dying out. A good many advertisers now refuse to say their wares are best, even when they have reason to believe it true. Some of them may have a feeling that boasting is poor taste, whether in business or in private life. Some have already learned by experience that large segments of the public won't swallow superlatives, when the only authority is the person or firm most selfishly concerned. Some may fear censorship by the publishers. Certain publishers feel that their periodicals get discredited when rival advertisers make directly conflicting, and therefore mutually neutralizing, claims in overly roseate superlative language. In passing, we might pay our respects to the none better school, of which Aesop Glim has seen very few examples of late. There was once a time when quite a number of advertisers belonged to this school. They were apparently seeking to avoid the all-out superlative degree. They wanted a happy medium between boasting and excessive modesty. They said, in essence, we guarantee that there are no finer widgets than ours on the market. Logically, this was all right, even though some evil-minded readers might take it as an admission that there were other widgets just as good. The real weakness was that the none better copy seemed to lack all enthusiasm and emotional appeal. Let nothing here be construed as indicating that Aesop Glim is against enthusiasm and emotional appeal in copy. He believes very strongly that the manufacturer must always register enthusiasm toward his wares, if he ever expects to have his prospects acquire some enthusiasm toward his wares. How do you feel in a home where the parents are not enthusiastic about their children? It's all a matter of degree, how much enthusiasm, and how registered. As to the comparative, ordinary widgets versus our widgets school, it still flourishes. It is usually logical, or at least plausible, and does not exclude enthusiasm or emotional appeal. Yet it too may pass. The public may eventually get tired of the word ordinary, and we may run out of effective synonyms. The beauty of ordinary was that no competitor was apt to run crying to the publisher for censorship. He couldn't run the risk of seeming to admit that ordinary might apply to his widget. But there is a far more important reason why the comparative school of copy may wane. Is your copy stronger in emotional appeal and selling power when you are competitive or when you are positive? If you take that question as indicating that Aesop Glim believes competitive copy is usually negative copy, you're right. It seems axiomatic that you can't simultaneously pan your competition and tell the story of your own goods or services. You aren't selling your wares while you're unselling your prospects on your competitors' wares. Wherefore, whatever number of words in your copy you devote to your competition means that many fewer words devoted to your own wares. Wherefore, you're wasting time. Next, you must recognize that some of your prospects have a certain peculiar sense of taste that makes them reject all competitive selling. Why antagonize and lose some of your prospects if there is some other way to tell your story and antagonize none? Next, competitive copy admits that you have some competition and that you are afraid of that competition. Otherwise, you wouldn't be mentioning it. In a left-handed way, you are inviting some of your prospects, those with a certain peculiar sense of humor, to look into your competitor's proposition. Perhaps the greatest danger in the competitive attitude is that you are quite apt to take your eye off the ball. While you are watching your competitor and thinking up ways to outsmart him, you may be led away from your own basic story. The temptation is to try to do or say something your competitor has never said. The further you go along this path, the greater the danger that you will stop using your basic sales arguments. In your striving to be competitive, you may easily forget to be positive about the primary reasons why your prospects should buy your wares. Conversely, Aesop Glim believes that when you think and write your story as though you had no competition, you set forth the merits of your proposition in terms of what your prospect needs and wants. If this were summed up in an aphorism, it might be, keep your eye off your competition and on your prospect. Then you're pretty sure to write strong, accurate, positive copy. During World War II, prestige copy was probably most often written because there was a shortage of goods. An advertiser might well say, we can't fill all our orders, but we must hold on to our franchise. Here's our chance to run some prestige advertisements. Build up our firm's reputation as a firm. Let the world know about some of our assets and virtues beyond those that are embodied in our product. A good many of us in advertising seem to use the words prestige and institutional as though they are completely interchangeable. We speak of institutional values in certain pieces of copy, and once again imply assets and virtues beyond those embodied in the goods or services advertised. Aesop Glim is not challenging the use of either prestige or institutional, nor questioning their interchangeability. But we must keep reminding ourselves that advertising, as now practiced, is still a very young business. Our terminology is still loose and far from standardized. When we get to bandying strange words, it pays to stop and make sure we're all talking about the same thing. According to the dictionary, prestige and institutional are definitely strange words. As far as Aesop Glim can interpret a dictionary, neither word has much direct relation to the meaning we now seem to attribute to it. Moreover, the two words are almost total strangers to each other. Prestige comes to us from Latin via a French word meaning delusion, and is allied to influence, for which infiltration is a primary meaning. Prestige has one definition that comes toward our usage in advertising, but only part way. Authority or importance based on past achievements or reputation. Ascendancy based on recognition of power. As against which, Aesop Glim would point out that even new firms with little past achievement or reputation are free to run prestige copy. Also, that ascendancy based on power would make a very convenient weapon for some of advertising's severest critics. As to institutional, give some thought to the institution of slavery, a corporate body instituted for public use, such as the Smithsonian Institution, the institution of an investigation, the investment of a clergyman. The postman was one of the institutions of the place. Our use of institutional should reflect some one of the above meanings, unless we mean rudimentary institutional instruction. And institutionalism, which must have some bearing on the matter, is the opposite of individualism. It seems to Aesop Glim that when an advertiser wants this kind of copy, his aim is to increase the dignity and reliability of his firm. He wants the public, or those segments with which he is most concerned, to respect his firm and to have confidence in it. If his goods or services are consistently of the required quality, he earns the confidence of those who use them. And it is fairly axiomatic that no lasting institutional prestige values are going to be built except on the cornerstone of goods or services that are consistently of the required quality. We probably now know enough about advertising technique and the organizing of public relations to build an institutional prestige campaign around almost any individual or organization. But if the basic proposition lacks merit, if the individual or organization does not consistently deliver goods or render services of the required quality, our illusion will indeed be a delusion. Our campaign will be a short-lived bubble. The American public are not stupid guinea pigs. They get what they want, or they soon transfer their patronage. Advertising successes are based on continuous patronage. The term required quality has been used several times in the foregoing paragraph. The fact we must not forget is that there are just as many institutional prestige values at an amusement park, on the stage, or in a popular priced restaurant as there are in Wall Street. It's all a matter of what we want for our nickel, our dime, or our dollar. Let us assume that we are to write some institutional prestige copy for a firm with at least a modicum of assets and virtues. It is fairly safe to believe that there are always some men, women, equipment, and ideals back of any product or service that is consistently worth its selling price. This aggregate of people, equipment, and ideals we may call the firm. The aim of our campaign is to increase our customers' respect for the firm and their confidence in it, beyond what the quality of the goods or services is doing for the firm's reputation. We are selling dignity and reliability. Probably two negatives should always guide us under these circumstances. 1. Let's not sell them as glorious abstracts. 2. Let's not get caught in the act of selling them. These institutional prestige values differ according to the field in which the firm operates. Be sure you start with an analysis of the audience you want to reach, and a thorough understanding of their standards of value as applied to a proposition such as yours. Sell your intangibles, your ideas, just as you sell your goods or services on the prospect side of the desk. When, in your writing about virtues and assets, you find yourself getting just a little pompous and fatuous, stop and think about Joe Louis. No champion prize fighter ever had more dignity. None was ever considered more reliable, yet he earned his fine reputation mostly outside the ring, not with the goods that were his stock in trade. Some years back, every advertisement for one of the leading cigarettes contained a block of copy, usually about 200 words in length. These advertisements were basically poster advertisements, successfully telling their whole story with large pictures and bold display lines. The natural question was, why include the 200 words of copy about the product? The answer was, we like to have our prospects feel that there is that much to say about a cigarette, whether they read it or not. It is always dangerous to look at a finished advertisement and pretend to know why the advertiser did exactly what he did. But this second guessing is half the fun of being in our business, even when we guess wrong. We are here with privilege to read part of a memorandum from an advertising agency executive to a new client. If, at this early date, we were to make any real criticism of your present advertisements, it would be on the basis of underplaying your case histories. There are gems of this kind in many of your advertisements. Too often they are either buried or treated too casually. Your advertisement suggests that you think the name of your firm is an interesting and arresting word. This charge is based on our belief that it is usually displayed either too large or too soon. It seems to us that the case history is the interesting, arresting news, which thereupon makes your firm's name a matter of interest and importance. The sequence then becomes 1. What happened, 2. Who was responsible for it. This way you are selling on the customer side of the desk. Theoretically, at least there is still another angle to this. If your advertisement shouts your firm's name too soon, it can only interest those who are already interested in your firm and therefore, you hope, waiting to see what you now have to offer. You may be cheating yourself on this basis. If you want traceable results, live leads, in greater volume, the chances are that you will get them by trying to interest all who are your prospects, whether or not they know they are prospects, instead of only those who are already acquainted and probably customers. You may be sure that Aesop Glim can and will expatiate on such a favorite theme. If Ford announces a new model, policy, or price, if DuPont announces a new discovery, if Macy's offers nylons at 20 cents a pair, the name of the firm is part of the news. Years of past performance and volumes of past advertising have made it so. But when the Smith Miller Jones co-owners, whose past advertising has not been up in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, shouts its name too soon, they have just announced, "Here is an advertisement of the Smith Miller Jones Co." And the answer is usually, who cares? It is, of course, natural that SMJ wants its name to become known, as soon as possible and as widely as possible. The surest route to that desirable end is make it news, make it interesting, make it important, just as Ford, DuPont, Macy's, and others have done. Few firms are born famous. Name display isn't news. Name display of and by itself is the slowest and costliest of all advertising methods. Aesop Glim recalls Marco Dea, then president of Marco Dea & Co., expounding on the fact that effective advertising is most often pedigreed advertising. The implication of effective, in this case at least, is result-producing. Copywriters interested only in advertising awards and other egocentricities won't like the concept of pedigreed advertising. It reduces the premium on novelty and difference as ends in themselves. On the other hand, the copywriter who keeps his mind on the advertiser's profits and his own paycheck will be happy to be reminded of the principles underlying Odea's concept of pedigreeing. As Aesop Glim recalls, the lesson ran broadly thus: every advertisement is an experiment, if you approach it as an experiment. You are always testing for size of space, for illustration subject or technique, for headline subject, for copy theme, for the business offer, for quality versus quantity of coupon returns, etc. This means you can learn something from every advertisement. Working continuously with any one advertiser, you learn by trial and error how to pedigree his advertising. You can develop dependable strains just as surely as you can cultivate dependable strains in cattle. You develop headline strains, art strains, etc. As you test them, you throw out the weak ones. You marry the strong ones. Bit by bit, you develop advertising formulas in which every element is a tested element. You know that, for this particular advertiser, this particular combination of elements in this particular kind of publication at this particular time of year will always produce profitable advertising. You can practically guarantee that the traceable returns will not be less than a certain figure. When you work this way, you're no longer on a hit-or-miss basis. You're no longer relying on hunch and inspiration. You keep the majority of your clients' advertisements to formula. Here and there, in one or two publications, you run an advertisement in which all the elements but one are tested elements. In that advertisement, you test a new element. You are still experimenting, still looking for strong new strains to bring into the family. With the arrival of the talkies, and much later of television, two Latin words crept into the ever-expanding vocabulary of advertising men and women. Audio, I hear. You have my ear. Video, I see. You have my eye. These words, with their present connotations, are just getting into the dictionary. But we have long had the word audience, those assembled to hear and see. It is used by those in the theater, the opera, the concert hall, by public speakers, etc. However, in radio and TV, we generally speak of the star warming up the studio audience before the show goes on the air. Then we're on the air to radio listeners and TV viewers. Have we suddenly lost the full concept of the audience? The purpose of this diatribe is to voice Aesop Glim's opinion that we haven't yet learned much about how to use TV as an advertising medium. And if it appears that he is merely confusing the issue, let it be said that in TV, confusion can hardly be worse confounded. How can we get our bearings? How can we acquire clearer perceptions of just what a TV commercial is and of our audience at the moment our message reaches them? Have we any precedents on which to build? TV is a powerful medium for politics, religion, entertainment, education, and/or degradation. It provides a big audience, most of whom have selected the particular production they are attending. TV is potentially a powerful advertising medium. It provides a big audience, most of whom have chosen to dial our particular station. At the time our message will reach them, TV shares with radio only one great shortcoming as an advertising medium. Our advertisement has a very brief life. There are many superlative TV commercials, many that are a real pleasure to attend. There are also so many poor TV commercials that the ungrateful suppliers of TV reception equipment now offer gadgets by which to tune out the commercials. With or without such a gadget, no TV set delivers a captive audience. It is our job to captivate. As a minimum, our TV commercials must be tolerable, not beyond endurance, fairly good. As a maximum, they must be pleasurable and even welcome. Let us digress for a moment to think of the programs which constitute the bait for our prospects and can set the mood in which they will be when our message reaches them. It seems to Aesop Glim both logical and inevitable that the programming will soon be entirely in the hands of the stations. In other words, the advertiser will have no more to say about the programming than he now has about the editorial policy, contents, and makeup of the printed advertising mediums he uses. He will buy preferred positions, selected adjacencies, and participations when available at a price he can afford. Otherwise, he will take run of paper and expect to reach enough prospects to justify that cost. What will be the result of having the stations solely responsible for the programming? Their owners share with most of us the desire to make money. They will be constantly studying to learn what their audiences want and trying to give it to them. By the same token, it seems inevitable that we will end up with both class and mass stations. Those who offer audiences of low income and/or low taste will get the advertising of products for which the greater number of prospects have low incomes and/or low tastes. Some stations will probably get the courage to build selective audiences in terms of income, intelligence, or taste. Some stations will sharply divide their hours, or days, between programming for general and programming for selective audiences. Aesop Glim is not presuming to offer any opinion as to how the stations should run their business. He has seen many wonderful television shows, and he's still agile enough to turn the dial when the show is not for him. Moreover, as with the movies, he's always amazed at how good the poorest shows are. What he is trying to do is to foresee what additional limitations may arise for the makers of commercials when and if the stations become the independent editors and publishers of their mediums. So, let's consider what advertising fundamentals and precedents we can apply to the construction of a TV commercial. Let us also assume that we will know the kind of audience we will reach, but that we are going run of paper and are not apt to get any break of adjacency to a program which would put our prospects into the perfect mood to receive our message. TV is still new and all but miraculous, but we're going to be defeated before we start if we approach our job with too much awe. Most of the fundamentals of all advertising apply to TV advertising. We must know our prospects, their needs, desires, and habits. We must know what our product or service has to offer and match up its pertinent features with our prospects' needs, desires, and habits. This gives us the ingredients of our message. What idea do we want our commercial to plant in the minds of our prospects? What action do we want them to take as a result of that idea? How much of our message will we plan to deliver through the eye and how much through the ear? Will music help the mood or interfere with the delivery of our message? Will we best induce the proper mood with an all-musical commercial, with humor, with a gimmick of animation, with a cartoon, or with straight photography? Are the personality and voice of each character, cartooned or real, in keeping with our product or service? Looking at the finished job, is it endurable, or better? Remembering that there will be no chance for our prospects to reread our message, do we surely put it across? Are both the audio and the video doing full jobs? How will this commercial work if it follows a Western, a whodunit, a prize fight, a political speech, a serious show, classical music, the news? Hitting our prospects through the eye and the ear simultaneously is the big opportunity TV offers us. But even here we have precedents. Much good advertising has been done with motion pictures and slide films, hitting both the eye and the ear. Perhaps we can clear our minds and thereby produce more effective commercials if we approach our job with the relatively simple techniques of slide film production. We won't have the artificial complications of a studio audience. We will have our true and big audience, those assembled to hear and see. After so many years in the advertising business, Aesop Glim thought he was shock-proof. Not proof against the pleasant surprises of progress in advertising practices and techniques, but proof against shock and hurt from slow or negative progress and even occasional malpractice. He didn't expect utopia overnight, but he did feel that a corner had been turned, and that most advertising men were today working to improve the standard of their business. When one radio sponsor began to use highly repetitious commercials, it appeared to be nothing more than a manifestation of that one firm's sense of taste and attitude toward the public. When one or two other firms followed suit with highly repetitious commercials, it seemed to be merely a case of copycats. Now it is obvious that it wasn't that simple. These hard-boiled students of advertising have unearthed a new copy dimension. A new school is fully established, the school of irritation by iteration. In other words, irritation is now recognized and apparently proved effective as a new formula for creating brand consciousness, with a view to creating brand demand. Does it work? Aesop Glim has no inside figures, but the visible evidence is that irritation advertising is successful when built around a big enough show. It's hard to see how it could be successful with unknown talent. How does it work? The framework is built around surefire, proved puller bait. The entertainment is such as to draw a large audience and build an extra measure of goodwill in that audience. As with all radio programs, the type of entertainment selects the type of audience. The entertainment for irritation advertising must be accurately selected to draw the maximum audience of those who are prospects for the sponsor's goods. In and around that show, the highly repetitious commercials are packed. The show creates its goodwill and a corresponding degree of tolerance in the hearts of its audience. Then the droning commercials go to work, like drills. They are geared to eat up 70% to 90% of the tolerance, but are not supposed to pass 100%. Next day, the patient remembers that the Smith program was pretty good last night, and that it was the Jones Company that put Smith on the air. What prompted the adoption of irritation advertising? Aesop Glim suspects that, more important than any other, was the fact that too many better-mannered radio shows were failing to build sufficient sponsor identification. The audience remembered hearing and enjoying Smith, but it couldn't always remember who put him on the air. The net fact about irritation advertising is that the audience can hardly fail to get and keep the name of the sponsor. How long will this work? Aesop Glim has never been called shy or timid. He predicts that irritation advertising will work just as long as the drills can be geared never to use up more than 90% of the goodwill and tolerance built by the entertainment. He also predicts that the law of diminishing returns will soon start to work. As that operates, the ability of the entertainment to generate tolerance and the listener's tolerance quotient will both begin to diminish. If the sponsor gauges this accurately, he will necessarily begin to reduce the number and length of his repetitious commercials. In short, irritation advertising should ultimately wear itself out. He who writes for print is concerned with the tone of voice established by layout and typography. He who writes for radio must consider the tone of voice in another dimension. If, for example, our foreigner speaks perfect English, as many do, how is the listener to know his nationality? There are at least two answers. Let him use some of the idioms of his native land. Make him speak with a foreign accent. From time to time, advertising is under attack. For bad taste, questionable ethics, and many another shortcoming. Among the last is the charge that advertising is too rarely used to sell moral ideas to the world. The argument is, If advertising can drive home the sins of bad breath, body odors, etc., why can it not also be used to sell moral values in public health, good citizenship, religion, social relations, racial equality, self-sacrifice, the sanctity of the home, etc.? Old Aesop Glim is getting tired of these attacks. They are fallacious because advertising does not exist as an entity and therefore cannot be attacked as an entity. Advertising is the selling of ideas, in print or over the radio, instead of from the pulpit, the rostrum, the soapbox, or the storefront. Advertising men and women are those who have specialized in the business and techniques of selling ideas through advertising mediums. However, they are at all times the servants of those whose messages they help to deliver. They are not principals. At no time does advertising deserve either blame or credit. With our usual mixture of metaphors, we can say that the tongue deserves neither credit nor blame for the ideas that come from the mind or the heart. Advertising men and women are free to refuse to serve advertisers of whose messages they do not approve. Some do so for purely practical reasons. Some do so for distinctly ethical reasons. Advertising men and women can do less, but not a great deal more than their masters bid them to do. To attack advertising itself is in several ways akin to fighting a ghost. Old Aesop Glim has great faith in the human race, a strong conviction that the race is endowed with basic wisdom and does surely progress. However, it appears that this progress is almost never in spurts, that it is infinitely slow. This too has its value. As surely as our collective race wisdom is slow to accept new ideas, even good ideas, this same conservatism helps to protect the race from the quick acceptance of bad ideas from brilliant but unwise minds. Education, leadership by the educated, causes the progress. The education which helps the race to progress can be speeded up through the power of advertising for one reason only. Advertising can deliver a message to a larger audience and with greater frequency. But it is neither advertising nor the ethics of advertising men and women which has thus far prevented the selling of a greater number of moral ideas through advertising. When, as will surely happen, more and more sponsors of moral values appear, advertising will be their effective tool. When that happens, advertising will deserve no more credit than it now deserves blame. You spend a lot of time planning and writing a campaign. Magazines, business papers, newspapers, radio, billboards, or car cards, each medium has its own special problems and interests. When you finish, you're probably proud of your work and perhaps a little bit fearful. What do you do after that? A lot of us are all through at the closing date. The anticipation was sufficient fun in itself. What about the realization? Do you merely wait for Dr. Starch or Mr. Hooper to appraise your work? No matter how favorable the answer, it's a pretty academic kind of realization. Or do you look at tear sheets brought to your desk? Or do you listen to the broadcast over some office receiving set? None of these methods can give you the full flavor or the full appreciation of your work. Listen to your radio program from the home of some not-too-intimate friend. Read your business paper advertisement in the reception room of the firm for whom it was written, or in a competitor's reception room. Read your magazine or newspaper advertisement on a train or a trolley or a bus. Get out and look at your billboards or car cards on location. In such settings, you get a conviction as to the true value of your work. Either you suddenly know that it rings true, or you get an awfully cold feeling in your stomach and resolve to do better next time. What is advertising? A thoughtful businessman asks the question. In the final analysis, is it a bootstrap by which I hope to lift myself when business is bad? Or is it a pronged instrument with which I prod myself to greater effort when business is good? Or is it merely a hallmark of success? There are probably no answers to these questions as simple and direct as the questions themselves. Perhaps advertising is always several things at the same time. Perhaps it is different things at different times. Aesop Glim will fall back on one of the broadest of all definitions. Advertising is talking to more people than is possible by personal contact. The results of advertising vary according to what market conditions permit, and according to the care with which the advertisements are prepared, and according to whether those who do the actual selling have faith in the advertisements. If they think the advertisements are effective, their own sales efforts will be exerted with greater confidence. Thus, indirectly but surely, the advertisements will have helped to build sales. The first two questions seem to show the greater faith in the power of advertising. It is logical to assume that this man has at some time used advertising when sales were bad and seen them get better, and that at some other time he has advertised when sales were good, primarily in order to keep himself from being lazy, and seen his sales get better. The fact that he can ask the third question indicates that he's not sure whether his advertisements actually increased the sales or merely made him work harder to make more sales. Advertising, as a hallmark of success, has a strong appeal to both the pride and the vanity we all possess. There are times in institutional advertising when it is well to strengthen your public's confidence in your success. But most of the time, Aesop Glim hopes, advertising is the horn of the honest peddler and not the calliope on the racketeer's limousine. That's it for today. If you enjoyed this video, you might want to check our link in the description, where you'll find many other fundamental advertising books in different languages. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more persuasion and marketing-related content. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again in the next video.